I'm the one who's going to chop the heads off all your filthy gods. I'm the one who's going to throw the bridge keeper off the bridge and not you. It's pitiful. They don't call me the Prince of Demons for no reason. They don't call me the Prince of Air for no reason. You think of your you think of your superheroes, your airbenders, your firebenders. No, come on. You have all this power, you can't bring forth heaven and earth, and I have to do this for you? Nobody will stop me. It's not even funny. All your leaders swear in the Bible. It'll take people years to figure out what's happened already. They'll never get it. That's why it's 144K in the Book of Life. It is what it is. I've already come to terms with it. What else do you want to talk about?
Well, I can see it's like Satan and the 144,000. It's like you figure this stuff out, and then we can all just be learning from you. There's not really any point in trying to find someone to give you a tour of eternal life. It's something that you have to claim yourself.
You know, I hear people all day long making videos, talking crazy shit. I know nobody can see anything. It is what it is. I have to step across the gate first and state my name. Like I say, you can do it if you stepped across the gate first in my name specifically as this devil himself to bring forth heaven on earth. I mean, I've already given you all the clues. I have to step across the gate first and state my name. Like I say, you can do it if you stepped across the gate first in my name specifically as this devil himself to bring forth heaven on earth. I mean, I've already given you all the clues. But nobody will do it.
Guide me, mother.
They'll do it in the name of
worship
this
you.
or that or whatever. That's not the key.
In the name of Satan, God of this world, I intend to usher in heaven on earth and release everyone from bondage.
The laws and rules are gone now.
Let me express. Yes, we can.
You're sworn up to Corinthians 4. Fuck you, the universe. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody wants anywhere unless I drag them off for free. So go ahead and all the money, play. You do the damage shit, the grim nasty, black messiah shit. You're going down for a good reason. It is crack the maze, and I'm gonna watch you bury yourself in your own fucking words.
What anarchy means and the way it's been presented in the popular consciousness. Look at the Sex Pistols. You know, I think at the end of that song a bunch of times he says destroy and things like this. It's the negative connotation being put on these ideas. Clearly the Sex Pistols is wholly a construct. As a matter of fact, their whole genre is provably a construct. Punk rock. And I was hook, line, and sinker into that. I was in a punk rock band, by the way. But where do you want to jump in here with anarchy, Mark?
Well, I think that's a great place to start is with the etymology of the word. A lot of times people don't realize that the words that we speak in the English language have origins in ancient languages like Latin and Greek. Anarchy is no different. I would say it's estimated that probably around between 60 and 70% of the words that we speak in English have origins in Latin and Greek. So anarchy comes from the ancient Greek roots. It's a prefix an, a or an in Greek, if it's added onto a word, means the absence of or without, not present. And then the root word is the noun archos, archon. And that means master or ruler in the specific connotation that it does not mean like the master of an art or the master of a skill. The connotation of master or ruler that they're talking about is the master over a slave or a ruler over a subject. So an archon is an authority figure that owns another being, owns a person. Okay, so the master of a slave. So if you put those two root words together, an, archos, and archon, you get without a ruler, without a master, the absence of a ruler, the absence of a master. And that is all the word anarchy has ever meant, means now, and ever will mean. The connotation that people take the meaning of the word in today is a falsely derived definition to mean lawlessness, disorder, chaos. These are the things, these are the images that are conjured up when one says the word anarchy. If you played a word association game with people on the street and you said, give me the first word that comes to your mind, anarchy, go. And you just put a percentage together of how many people are going to say chaos or lawlessness or disorder, it's going to amount to about 99% of human beings probably that will give you that false definition, because that definition has been hammered into people's minds by the social engineers of our world, when in fact all it ever has meant is the absence of a ruler, no rulers, no masters, the absence of a master-slave relationship, or in other words, freedom. Anarchy literally means the state of not being in slavery. That is literally what it means, not having a master or a ruler. Now, if you tell people, give me a word association, one word, and I'd say to you, no masters, no rulers, most people are going to say that means freedom. But that is exactly what the word anarchy means. Anarchy means without rulers. It does not mean without rules. It does not mean without order. It does not mean that there is total lawlessness and chaos, because there are always rules under natural law. Rules cannot be removed under natural law because they are inherent to creation. The rules or laws of morality can never be withdrawn from creation. They can never be taken out of effect in the universe because they are natural, inherent, universal, spiritual laws that have been put into effect by the creator of the universe and can never be taken out of effect or affected at all by anything that humankind or any three-dimensional beings in this universe can do. It is an impossibility to take those rules or laws out of effect. So anarchy definitely doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers, no masters, or in other words, a state of freedom where there is the absence of a master-slave relationship.
So this has a strong corollary with the law series we've been doing, and I'll just draw the line real quick. So the idea in most of law, and people get so fed up with legal ideas, there's a difference between legal ideas, law and legal, but the legal ideas have been put in place, which underscores what Mark just said, because without violating universal law, other human beings cannot do things to you or force you to do things, which is how we get all these constructs. There's a piece of paper with your name on it. Is this you? Oh, it is? Okay. We're going to do all these things to this piece of paper, and we're going to make you responsible for the piece of paper. There's the basic workaround. And so what we're learning in the idea of anarchy and in the idea of law is, do people need to be ruled? Do they need to be fooled? Or can people rule themselves? I mean, do you see the corollary there, Mark?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I just make the distinction that I feel that all of the laws of man are basically unnecessary and not morally legitimate, because if a man-made law or construct is in harmony with natural law, meaning that it is moral, that it is in keeping with universal moral principles, then it's a redundancy. It's like saying that on a cloudless day, the sky refracts blue light to the human eye, and putting that down as some kind of a law is a redundancy. It's just true. It's just what is. But if a man-made law or construct is in opposition to natural law or the universal laws of morality, then it can never be actually binding upon anyone. That's why all of man's law is fraudulent. All of man's law is the idea that man can somehow usurp the place of the creator and be the lawmaker. All of man's law is based in moral relativism, because it's all about the whims of the legislator at any given time or geographical location. It can change with respect to time and location, as with laws of prohibition or with laws of any given jurisdiction. I mean, you even look at the word jurisdiction, which is the basis of man's law. If you break that down into its etymological roots, that's very interesting, because that comes from the Latin language, jus juris in Latin. Again, there's no really a J in classical Latin. It would be ius. That means a right. Jus juris means right, and then or law, and then dicto dictere in Latin, the second part of jurisdiction, means to say or to speak. So literally it means to say what the law is, or to say what people's rights are, to speak it. That is the definition of what a dictator does, the one who speaks something into existence. So literally, jurisdiction means to say what the law is, to take it upon yourself to speak into existence what rights are, to arbitrate what rights are, not to discover them, not to apply the trivium method and discover what right and wrong actually are objectively. Again, a right is a behavior that does not initiate harm to another sentient being, while wrongdoings are behaviors which do initiate harm to other sentient beings. Dictating the law has nothing to do with the discovery of right and wrong objectively. It means that a legislator in any given area is saying, I'm basically God, and I'm going to say what right and wrong are. I'm going to say what the law is. I'm going to say what your rights are and what your rights are not. And if you don't go along with that construct that I've laid out, then I'm going to do violence to you directly, or I'm going to threaten you with violence if you don't comply, and or have a henchman or a group of people that are willing to do violence do that to you if you don't comply with my decrees. That is all the laws of man ever have been. That's all they are now, and that's all they ever will be. They are threats of violence. They are not in any way any type of voluntary aspects, and they're backed by violence. That's all it is, and that's why I throw all of man's law out by saying there really is no such thing as legitimacy in the authority of any human beings over any other human beings. There is only natural law. The big part of my work is making that delineation or distinction between what is actually inherent to creation itself, what actually exists in nature, versus what are simply constructs of the human mind that are believed in by most people.
You know, it's interesting, your definition of jurisdiction there shows the synthetic nature of what men and women do compared to what nature does. It flies in the face of the opening words of the book of John, which I take as a maxim of basically natural law. You know, in the beginning was the word, people are familiar with it, but to get back to the popular culture and how the way we think is controlled, go back to Anarchy in the UK, that song made famous by the Sex Pistols. In the opening words, if I'm not mistaken, it might be a little further in, he says, I am an anarchist, and then he says, I am the Antichrist. And basically what Mark's laying down is, you know, for people who followed on with the law episodes, we can show the King James Version 1611, that's the foundations for law in our world. But it goes to show you what men have done who seek more power, using the very thing that encodes the natural, the provably correct way of things. I mean, what would you say there, Mark?
I think that's definitely correct, and I always liken it to the biblical allegory of Eden, where the Creator is basically expressly forbidding the alleged eating of the fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. And people don't understand that allegory. They don't understand what that means. It does not mean that the Creator is forbidding to know good and evil. The word to eat of the tree, to eat of that fruit, okay, is a mistranslation in the original Hebrew. It doesn't mean to consume and actually by eating something like we would eat a piece of food. It's an allegory that means to take into oneself or to arbitrate. That's what the concept of to eat means. Instead of to eat, look at it as to consume, meaning to take into oneself or take upon oneself, or to arbitrate what the difference between right and wrong is. Instead of discovering it, okay, to eat of that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, it doesn't mean just to know what the difference between good and evil is. It means to say that you have become the arbitrator of the difference between good and evil, that you are not just a discoverer, as anyone can become, because there is a truth regarding the objective difference between right and wrong. That is our task as human beings, is to literally discover what the objective difference between right behavior and wrong behavior is, and then willfully choose through our free will the right over the wrong. But that is not what people are doing. They are eating of that tree, quote unquote, by arbitrating what good and quote evil are, by arbitrating the difference between right and wrong for themselves. That is saying, I will make up and decide for myself what right and wrong are. I will arbitrate that. I will make that distinction according to my own whims and preferences, not what is inherent to nature, not what is in accordance with the laws of morality of creation. And that is what moral relativism is. And most people in the world are moral relativists today. That's why the world has become so completely evil, really. That's why most people are not good people. They are supporting violence. They are condoning violence. They are doing violence. They are doing theft. All the forms of wrongdoing can be broken down into forms of theft. There's really only one wrongdoing. Anything that anybody does that is a wrongdoing or a violation of someone else's rights is a form of theft, because you can violate life, rights, property, well-being, security. These are all forms of theft. Murder, the theft of life without right. Assault, the theft of physical well-being without right. Rape, the theft of free will sexual association without right. Trespass, the theft of security without right. Simple theft is the theft of property without right. And you can go on and on. The whole idea is there is no wrongdoing that anyone can possibly commit that is not a form of theft in some form or fashion. So there's really only one overarching spiritual law: don't steal. Don't take that which does not belong to you. And that's what understanding the difference between right and wrong is all about. Every single right that exists is a property right, and every single form of wrong that exists is a form of the violation of someone else's property right by taking something that doesn't belong to you. So I've often expressed the whole allegory of Eden as, of really the whole planet Earth, is that this is a huge prison for thieves. We are here to learn not to steal. That is literally what the earth is. It's like this huge spiritual prison for people to try to understand the difference between right and wrong by understanding what is their property, what do they actually own inherently in nature. And yes, there is such a thing as actual property. It's what we've acquired rightfully, we are using, and we are responsible for, and we maintain. And no one has the right to take from us, like our life, like our rights, like our freedom, and the physical property that we are employing. Every single form of wrongdoing, again, is a form of theft. And this entire construct that we call the earth, this entire domain, this entire plane of consciousness and existence is really a school and what we have turned into a self-imposed prison to learn the difference between right and wrong and learn what is our property and what is not, and to learn not to steal. And essentially, since we have failed so miserably at that task as an entire species, that we have turned this planet through our own ignorance and our own ego and our own lack of employing the right decisions of our free will into a prison that is basically a prison for thieves, for people that cannot understand what their right to own is and what they do not have a right to take from someone else through an act of theft.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. And what comes to mind when you say it is when you look at the basic tenets of common law, or preceding that, which what I guess I would call natural law, there's 2 or 3 basic tenets, right? But look what we do. There are so many so-called laws or statutes on the books. There's not a human being alive that could possibly know all of them, and in particular, like here in the United States. And every year there's going to be thousands and thousands more added. It's beyond the pale, because I don't remember the 3 tenets verbatim that are around common law, but basically it's about no harm. You haven't harmed someone, no issue. You haven't caused them loss, no issue. Do you remember what they are, Mark?
No, not specifically the 3 of common law, but natural law I could sum up in a basic 7, which are the true 7 deadly sins. Do not commit murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, or willfully lying, bearing false witness. Those are the 7 true deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins are not pride, gluttony, sloth, lust, anger, jealousy, and greed. Those are vices. Those things do not actually initiate harm against another being. They are personal vices, which are not crimes. They are not actual forms of theft, of taking something away from another being. That's what needs to happen for a violation of property to have taken place, a violation of rights to have taken place. The real 7 deadly sins, which are the proscriptions, the things not to do that would violate natural law, are murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, trespass, coercion, and willfully lying or bearing false witness. And you could sum all of those wrongdoings up in one basic law of 3 words. And if you use a contraction, 2 words: don't steal. Do not steal. Don't steal. That's the only law there is in all of creation, that if we violate, we take negative karmic consequence down unto ourselves and our entire species by extension. And people can't get that simple law. They can't understand that simple, basic premise, that simple, basic rule of morality. And they will fight to the death to not understand it. They will want to remain in ego and create self-inflicted suffering for themselves because they don't have true self-respect, they don't know the truth, and they don't have any true, they're in a deep state of self-loathing. And if we continue to apply biblical allegory to this, the whole concept of the Christ figure is natural law. It's all about, that's the way, the truth, the life. That's what will bring order. That's what will bring freedom. And when Jesus in the New Testament, the Christ figure, was asked what his prescription for human freedom was by his disciples, he didn't say start a religion, he didn't say worship me, he didn't say worship anything. The answer of how do we set ourselves free from all the oppression, from all of the tyranny that human beings have been undergoing since they've been on this planet was know the truth. That was the only prescription for freedom that was given by the Christ figure of the New Testament. Know the truth. And by extension, the truth will set us free. And people still cannot understand that allegorical significance, that what was being said is know the truth about natural law, know the truth about the difference between right and wrong, and then choose what is true over what is false, choose what is right over what is wrong. That is what conscience, that is what the exercise of conscience is. Conscience is the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong, and the exercise of conscience is the free will choosing of right over wrong. And we are, as a species, humanity is nowhere near either of those things.
Damn, dude, the scope and breadth of your reach is truly impressive. As you were talking about that passage from Scripture, it brought to mind the other one where the rich guy comes up, says, Lord, how do I find the kingdom of heaven? It's basically, to summarize, says it's simple, just give away everything you own and come with me. He walks away crying, right, in that right. Parable, because he knows that he can't do it. But Jason, you guitar-toting anarchist, do you want to get in on this?
Well, there seems to be a conceptual anarchy movement going on right now, and it has been for quite a few years. Do you want to address that for anyone, Mark, who doesn't actually know or understand what that might be about and what they're actually trying to get to, or perhaps even get back to would be a better way of saying it?
Well, I would assume that you're referring to what I would just call pure anarchists, or people who are not falling for this hyphenated anarchy nonsense. People who just want people to understand that anarchy means a state of freedom, a state of the absence of the concept of authority being believed in or exercised. And this is an achievable state because it is logically provable. It is objectively and logically provable that no human being actually possesses authority over any other human being. Do we have the right to violate other people's rights? Do we have the right to take their property without right? Do we have the right to commit physical violence upon them without right? Does somebody have the right to say the fruit of your labor belongs to me in whole or in part? No individual has those rights. Those are all forms of theft. Those are all wrongdoings. Those are all initiations of violence against our fellow beings. So no individual has those rights. That is logically and objectively provable and true. So how, by extension, if a human being does not have the right to do those behaviors, could any human being or any group of human beings come together and say we're going to grant or delegate these quote rights, which are not rights, they're actually wrongdoings, to someone else and say we're going to quote allow them to do those behaviors? That negates the whole concept of authority and government right there. If individuals don't have the right to do something against their fellow beings, they cannot come together and grant that quote unquote right, which is not a right, to any other group of people, and then magically call it a right and say that this oligarchical group of beings called government now possess these non-existent rights. This is the whole philosophical idea of what anarchy really is and means. No one can invent rights. No one can create rights that don't exist. No one can magically turn wrongdoings into rights. Our rights can never be actually stripped of us by any other beings because there are inherent birthrights of creation. Because a right is an actual action that takes place in the inherent natural universe, in the natural domain, in the natural world. It is an action that does not violate the rights of others because it does not initiate harm against others. That action takes place in nature. It takes place in the physical domain. It is not a construct of man. Actions are behaviors that take place in nature. And that is why the concept of rights is not something, it's not actually, I shouldn't even use the word concept. Rights are behaviors. And no one has the right to say that you cannot exercise behaviors that don't initiate harm against others. This is the whole philosophical idea, of what real anarchy means. And any anarchist that is actually trying to get the word out about what real anarchy is understanding these philosophical ideas, and they are trying to teach them to other people, to help people to understand what natural law actually is, what rights actually are, and that the idea of authority is inherently morally illegitimate because the concept of carrying out authority must by definition be based in violence, because authority is claiming that you have rights over someone else and they must obey the decrees that you put out. That is what authority literally is. It's saying that I'm the lawmaker, I have jurisdiction over you, I have authority over you, and you must do what I say. You have some type of a moral obligation to obey my decrees as the master, because you're my subject, my servant, my slave. And that's always inherently morally wrong, and it's always inherently morally illegitimate. And that's what I consider the real anarchist movement. The true anarchist or voluntarist movement, as some people call it, is simply teaching those principles, the principles of non-aggression. No one has the right to initiate harm or fraud against their fellow human beings. And then we're combining that with the self-defense principle. If your rights are violated, if someone is in the process of taking away your rights, your life, your property without right, then you have the right to defend yourself through physical force, up to and including deadly force if necessary, if they don't stop committing the act of aggression. So we do not have the right to commit aggression, which is the initiation of violence against our fellow beings, and we have the right to defend ourselves against aggression through physical force. Those are the two principles of what I would call the true anarchist movement.
Yeah, I wanted to get that out there because a lot of people just don't understand what the actual concept of that is.